Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
So the audience is not participating much. I didn't hear anything. Nobody was singing. Why is that? So we'll chant one Hare Krishna all together. I need some energy to start speaking. So let's do it together on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Excellent. That gives me a little bit of inspiration to speak. So how many of you do not have a cell phone? Two people, so they may not understand my class. Okay, but I'm going to try. So, as we all know, we all have cell phones. Every waking moment, we are checking the cell phone. We have very fancy ones, we have simple ones. So I thought I'm going to use the example to introduce my topic. Is we all have cell phones, we buy new ones, and whenever we buy a new phone, it has new features, right? So we need a manual, we need some instructions. It doesn't have to be a paper manual, but we need some instructions in order to use a cell phone. All cell phones perform the same function. They transmit, they receive, they send messages, and sometimes they act up, right? So any cell phone in the world will have those basic functions. But as we buy better and better phones, we have newer functions. How many of you use iPhones? Right? Few people. AirDrop, that's like the best thing that ever happened to me, right? So, but I still know iPhone users who don't know how to use AirDrop. So whenever I go for conferences, we have to teach them. This is how you use your AirDrop. So if you don't read the manual, you can never really use a device to its fullest capabilities for what it is meant for, right? And that's true about any device that you might buy. Every packaging comes with a manual. Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
I'm sure we've bought at least one device in our lifetime, but it comes in a packaging which is a waste of paper and whatever, but it also has a manual. And even if we don't read the manual, we never throw it away. I have like files and files of like my lawnmower and trimmer and this, and I just keep the manuals because someday I might have to use it when I don't know how to use the device. So we have been given this lifetime, we've been given this body, and we need to figure out how to use it. That's why I call the topic art of living, right? So when we get a phone, if I just keep it here on the table forever, is it going to be of any use? So you need a person to actually pick up the phone and start using. So similarly, when we've been given the body, if there was no soul, there was no living entity inside that is actually controlling the physical body, what is the use of the body? Some of us may have had the sad occasion when we actually see somebody pass away and we see the body is still there, but we say the person is gone. Have you heard of this at least? They left, she left, he left, right? So we know that the body is something that has been given to us. We haven't been given to the body. So once we understand that, we understand that we need some instructions. We need to know how to live this life. And that's where the Bhagavad Gita comes in. The Bhagavad Gita is nothing but a manual. It's not a religious text. It's not sectarian. It's not something that belongs to the Indians or belongs to the Hindus or any such thing. This is a manual of how to use your body when you've been given a human body. There are many different types of living entities, living organisms. There are viruses, COVID virus, very potent. There are fish, there are reptiles, amphibians, mammals, and like we are part of the mammals, so humans. So they all perform the same function, like we said, transmit, receive. Like all phones have the same function. So all living entities, they mate, they defend, they eat, right? So they are like the same functions, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. The dog does the same thing, the cat does the same thing, and the humans do the same thing. So what is the difference? Why is it that the dog never keeps a human as a pet? Although it seems like sometimes, right? It's always the human that keeps the dog as a pet. So there is something that the humans have that other living entities don't have. Any answers? What is it that we have? Yes. Mind. Okay. Everybody is conscious, otherwise there'll be dead bodies, even in cats. Mind. Yes. Intelligence. What did you say? Louder. There's no wrong answer today. Tell me. Intellect. Yes. Yes. Ability to speak, but parrots speak. I know parrots that say Krishna. Yes. Rationalization or power of discrimination. Okay. So humans have the power of discrimination to decide what is right, what is wrong, what they want to do, what they don't want to do, in a meaningful way. So this Bhagavad Gita basically is a manual that is basically helping us to capitalize on the power of discrimination that we have. So this Bhagavad Gita was spoken 5,000 years ago. We all know that it was spoken in a place called Kurukshetra, which is close to Delhi. It's a real place, close to New Delhi. And it was it spoken in a palace? It was spoken on the battlefield. Who was it spoken to? Arjuna. Was Arjuna happy? Was he sitting in comfort? Was he not depressed? He was depressed. So he was in crisis, right? He was in depression and anxiety. He didn't know his family members were giving him trouble. Anybody identifies with that? Family members were giving him a lot of anxiety. And he was very confused. So some people might say, oh, Bhagavad Gita is for someone who has time. No, it was not spoken for someone who has time. It was spoken for someone who was in extreme distress and was standing on a battlefield and had to kill his own family members. So this is a manual for people who are in crisis. And I think right now, everybody is in a crisis. The crises may be different, but the crisis is there, right? So this is for everybody basically. So anybody who walks out today thinking that I'm okay, I don't need this, I'm sorry, but you're mistaken. So we all need to know what is given. So anyways, so the conversation starts between Arjuna and his friend Lord Krishna. And Krishna sees that Arjuna is not able to do anything. Arjuna is basically just sitting on his chariot doing nothing. He's put his bow down, he's put his arrows down, and he says, I don't want this war. I'm happy to just live with my family members. I don't need wealth. I'm happy to live in a village. So he's basically just justifying running away from his duty. Bhagavad Gita talks about duty and how we cannot reject our duty. The Bhagavad Gita is so misquoted where people think, Sarva Dharman Paritaja, reject your duties. That's not what Krishna says. So if you study the Bhagavad Gita carefully, at every point you will see Krishna saying, do your duty, but don't wait for the results. Do your duty. So don't mistake in that once you start reading Bhagavad Gita, you're going to reject everything, quit your job and move into the ashram. That's not what the Bhagavad Gita is. Bhagavad Gita is for people who are on the battlefield. Okay? So in the first 6 chapters, Krishna explains to Arjuna all of these things. He says, listen Arjuna, you need to do your duty. You're not going to think who's standing in front of me. You're fighting for religiosity. You're fighting for the right reason. Okay, so he explains that. And then he makes Arjuna understand that those that you think are relatives in this lifetime, they are only for this lifetime. Because the living entity will move to a next body after dying. So the whole of chapter 2, Arjuna is taught about the spirit soul. What are the features, what are the characteristics of a soul? It doesn't get cut, you cannot make it wet, you cannot destroy it. How small is it? So the whole expanse of chapter 2 talks about how the soul is different from the body. And that's when Arjuna starts to understand. He says, tell me more. So Krishna continues through the 6 chapters. He explains to him the difference between humans, animals, discrimination, and Arjuna starts to ask questions. When we start to ask questions, That's when the manual kicks in. That's when you become human. It's called the spirit of inquiry. If you don't ask questions, you will never know that you're wrong or right. So the power of inquiry is very important for any kind of self-improvement, self-realization processes. Who am I? Why am I here? Why am I suffering? Why is this person sick? He never did anything wrong. Very common questions. So these type of questions start, I never did anything bad to anybody. Why is this happening to me? We all have felt that at some point. Right? So this is what Arjuna starts to ask, and he goes through the whole 6 chapters, the verses. Why am I suffering? Why do people suffer? All of this is there in the first 6 chapters. And Krishna emphasizes again, this body, you have to do your duty and you have to continue your action. In chapter 4, Arjuna finally realizes, I need more education. And he says, Krishna, you're not just my friend, I am accepting you as my teacher. So to study any manual, you need an expert guidance, and that's what we call guru. So nobody can really just pick up the Bhagavad Gita and start reading on their own. They need somebody to study it with them, somebody to guide them. And that's what happens to Arjuna. And so when Krishna takes over the role of guru, he starts giving the real deal. So as we proceed into the next chapters, which is 7 to 12, these are the cream of the Bhagavad Gita. They're the chapters which deal with Bhakti Yoga. So the first 6 chapters were only Karma Yoga, action. What action do we need to do? What happens? Why are people sinful? And so on and so forth. And then he comes into the real stuff. And in chapter 7 is one of my favorite chapters. Krishna tells Arjuna, you need to remember me constantly. And how can you remember me? And that's chapter 7. I am the taste of water. You've heard that verse, right? So every time you drink water, you think of Krishna. You walk out, in chapter 2, Krishna says, I'm like the seasons are changing. Sometimes it's winter, sometimes it's summer. These situations come into your life. So we walk out into the snow and you think, yeah, that's what Krishna says. I always use that it's very easy in Canada because the seasons are so severe. So the minute the snow starts falling, you think of Krishna. So chapter 7 is very interesting. He says, this is how you can remember me constantly, right? So, and then you might say, why should we remember Krishna? Just because he says in the Bhagavad Gita. So in chapter, is everybody okay? Okay, just no health situation, right? They're just leaving, okay. And then he goes further and further into chapter 8, chapter 9. In chapter 8 is another very important verse which I always like, and I've heard it so many times, and it's 8.7. I'm just going to read it to you. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mama anusmara yudhacha mayarpita manobuddhir mamay vaishyasi asamsaha. I picked this verse because it's so important. He says, therefore Arjuna, you should always think about me. Krishna is saying, not think about me. Krishna is talking here. In the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty. Did he say reject me and just reject your work and think about me, just do Hare Krishna Mahamantra and that's it? No, he says, please carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. So Arjuna's prescribed duty at that time was to fight the war. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. So many people spoke about mind and intelligence, right? So this is what Krishna is saying about that. So in chapter 8 he says, think about me, focus on me, do your duty, think about me. And then you might say, why would I think about Krishna? Why can I not just think of someone else? Right? So then the next chapters, Krishna shows Arjuna that I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These are my opulences. Right? Chapter after chapter he goes through it. Then he shows him his universal form. Right? In chapter 10 he says, Aham sarvasya prabhu. He says, everything is coming from me. I am the seed-giving Father. Multiple verses throughout these. So he establishes himself as a Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is your middle chapters, 7 to 12. Chapter 12, another very, very important chapter. which basically teaches Arjuna how we can perform devotional service. If you can do this, you do this. If you cannot chant, then you can do this. If you cannot even do devotional service, then you just offer the food. If you cannot offer the food, just serve your family. So he brings it down to a level where every person can perform devotional activity. Very important chapter to study. So wherever you're a student, you're an international student, you're working somewhere, there's so much crisis. At each level, Krishna has provided the ability to perform devotional service. So it's not like, when I settle, then I'll do it. When I get a good job, I'll do it. When I get married, I'll do it. Oh, now I have a wife, let me get a house, then I'll practice devotional service. Oh, I have a house, now I have to pay my mortgage, then I'll... No. Who has the time? People are dying like flies. Right? So at each level, you can perform devotion. That is chapter 12, the beauty of chapter 12. It brings it to your level. Then he goes into chapter 13. Now he's established. You're not this body, you're the spirit soul. You need to know what you're doing, you need to perform your duty, and you need to perform devotional service. And then he goes into the next, the last part of chapters in the Bhagavad Gita, which is 13 to 18. And here, Arjuna starts to think, he says, okay, what is my relationship to you? What is the relationship of a living entity to the Supreme Personality of Godhead? He's trying to establish a relationship, because you cannot serve without having a relationship. Would you comb the hair of a random child on the street? No. You'll only comb the hair of your own child, because there's a relationship. So Arjuna wants to establish, who are you to me? Okay, you're my friend, now you're my guru, but you want me to serve you. So what is the relationship of a living entity with Krishna? So then Krishna explains the relationship between the spirit soul, the living entity, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the material energy, and so many complex, the field. He's explained it in much detail in the next 6 chapters. And then he continues to explain why it is important to follow these principles. And then he also explains what happens to people who don't use the manual. So he talks about the divine and the demoniac natures. So what is the nature of a demoniac person? Who rejects the manual. What happens when you reject the manual? You use the instrument badly and it breaks down. Then you have to call support systems, right? And they say, no, you didn't use it properly, pay $500. To just come and look at your appliance, they will charge you $200. So that's like going to the medical system, right? So if you don't use your manual properly, then what happens? Krishna explains in chapter 17 and 16 and 17. And then he says, Arjuna says, but why are people sinning? Why is it people don't understand that this is what they're supposed to do? Somebody's, eating whatever, somebody's doing drugs, somebody's drinking, we so many different types of people we see. So Krishna says, yes, there is an explanation. They're called gunas. There are 3 modes of nature under which people act. And once you study those 3 modes of nature, you will be able to explain everybody's behavior. Goodness, passion, and ignorance. 3 modes. If you study that chapter, you will never be surprised at how people behave. Because it's expected behavior. Why would you be surprised if you expect someone to behave based on their natures, which is determined by the gunas? So this is a very miraculous book that explains everything. And after completing everything, Krishna comes to the last chapter. So in the first chapter he said, Arjuna, don't be worried about body, material energy. This is all asat. What is the meaning of asat? Untrue, temporary, that can be destroyed. In the last chapter, as we come into the 18th chapter, in the 17th chapter, Krishna ends by saying Om Tat Sat. So from asat, he brought Arjuna to Sat. So he's saying, you're the living entity, you will never be destroyed. If you understand how to do devotional service, if you understand the effect of the modes, you will never be destroyed. So starting from asat, he brought Arjuna to Sat. That is using the manual, or that is removing ignorance. Like we say, right? Om Ajnana Timirandasya. So removing improper knowledge or lack of knowledge is removing ignorance when we talk in the spiritual context. And so in the 18th chapter, finally Krishna says, if you understand all of this and if you're able to assimilate into your life to your best capacity, remember he dumbed it down to each level. It's like devotional life 101. If you can do this, do this. If you can do this, do this. The chapter is called Renunciation, Perfection of Renunciation. How you can remain in this world but yet not get involved. You'll be renounced. Renounce doesn't mean wear bad clothes or give away your devices. No, renounce means using what you have in the service of Krishna. That is the definition of renunciation. Not wearing orange clothes and leaving your house. Right? Yes, don't use a Gucci bag, but you can use a bag. Right? So using whatever you have to the best capacity in the service of Krishna. Today you had time, you came here. That's devotional service. Right? After listening to the class, you might pick up a Bhagavad Gita, you might want to get a manual, you want to come back next Sunday, that's devotional service. So Krishna explains in this last chapters of how to be renounced. Despite of having power, position, your job, your, whatever you have. So this is just a small gist of the Bhagavad Gita. I had only 20 minutes, I think. So I tried to do justice, to give you a flow of how things are in the Bhagavad Gita and how it progresses. And in the last few chapters, chapter 15, very famous, we read that chapter when somebody is leaving their body. Why? Anybody knows? We chant that chapter when someone's passing away. Because it is a description of the spiritual world. So Krishna not only tells Arjuna how the material world is, he says, but this is where you can come. Urva Moolam Adashakam. Very famous, people memorize that whole chapter. He tells them that my abode, you don't require electricity. It's illuminated on its own. So all of these things are sequentially given, and I urge you very strongly to read the Bhagavad Gita, join classes. We have classes for people here, and it's an absolute essential if you want to learn the art of living. Otherwise, it's good as being dead. If you don't understand that you're a living entity, and if you think that you're the body, then you're already dead. Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita. I'm not making it up. So to not know that you are a living entity is as good as being dead. So with this, I'm going to invite my very good friend, the manual of our class today. There it is. So this is our dear Bhagavad Gita.
It's my birthday this Friday. Who's coming? Are you coming? Please come, we have a big party here. Right in the temple, Friday evening.
So what else are we doing, Bhagavad Gita?
We are going to read all the shlokas together. And it's been, as you can see, it's very dusty here in the book room. So I've been sitting for very long, but I'm dying, I'm eager to come to your home, into all the different homes of your friends and people, you know people, I don't know. So please, I'm eager to get out of this place so that I can go and enjoy and benefit and relish more home. So please, 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 take me home, take me home.
So we're going to take him home today. Okay, so all of us are going to try to take some Bhagavad Gitas. And I would like to hand over to Satyabhama Mataji, who's going to share with us what is happening for the Gita Jayanti and Prabhupada Marathon, which is a time when we like to send out our Bhagavad Gitas outside.
Hare Krishna.